Today, we begin with the fourth lesson in your collection. It is actually a speech by Albert Camus. It is a Nobel Prize acceptance speech. As you know, Albert Camus is a great writer and he received Nobel Prize in Literature in the year 1957. And after accepting the award, he makes a speech. And that speech is the fourth lesson that you have to study. I know that you are not very much familiar with Albert Camus. He is from Algeria in France. And he was born in the year 1913. And he died in France in 1960. I think you are familiar with the Nobel acceptance speech by Martin Luther King. That is more popular. But you may not be very much familiar with Camus. But we will see the biography of the person first. And then we will go through his speech. And when you listen to the speech, all of you have the text with you. Please open the text. And we will be reading lines, not completely from here and there. Because this lesson is different from the other essays that you have studied. Here, a more stylistic language is employed. And again, it is a tougher language. And you will see a new philosophy called the existential philosophy that is seen throughout this speech. And so, in order to make things clear, we have to read from the text, at least at some portions. And so, dear students, please keep the text open. First of all, coming back to the author, Albert Camus. And again, there isn't much to explain in this speech. Camus focuses on some important points. And you have to evaluate the speech from these points. Otherwise, you may feel a bit difficulty in following his language. This is a speech. And first of all, in the first part of the speech, he expresses his gratitude for getting this Nobel Prize. And he was so happy. And he admits that he never had expected such a Nobel Prize for himself when there are great writers all around the world. But Albert Camus, his philosophy, his sincerity, his honesty is revealed in his writings, and all the works were taken all together, and thus the committee decided to award him the Nobel Prize. And so, first of all, Camus is so happy and expresses his great happiness in receiving this Nobel Prize in Literature. And he received this award at a very young age. And it is said that he was the second youngest recipient of the Nobel Prize award. And then he was the first African to receive a Nobel Prize for Literature. And all his important works were taken into account. And the jury had gone through the sincerity of his approach towards his countrymen, his great honesty, and he was rewarded the prize. And so he expresses his joy in receiving the prize. And in the second part, he explains the role of the art and the artist in the society. And he says that even though he is an artist, for him, his people are all the more important. He cannot place art above his countrymen. He wrote for them, and he considered himself as one among them. And again, his views on politics also you will see. That is, he was a leftist, and he worked as an editor in the leftist journals. But at the same time, he cannot agree with the dogmas and against many cruel activities of these communists. And so he expresses his dissatisfaction against these dogmas. And as a result, he was kicked out of the Communist Party. But Camus says that for him, people are important than the party. His politics is for the people, for the welfare of the people, and he has great concern for them. And that is all the more important. And that is Albert Camus. And so, before going to the speech, and so these things you have to remember when you go through the speech. And then, before going to the details of the speech, just we will have a look at the person Albert Camus. And so, who is Albert Camus? First of all, he is born in Algeria, in France, in 1913, and he died in France in the year 1960. He was a journalist, novelist, playwright, and philosopher. And so, Albert Camus, he died at a very young age. He was nearly 47 when he died. But within that short span of time, he was able to achieve a lot. Nobel Prize itself is a great proof of his merit. He was a journalist, a novelist, playwright, and philosopher. And regarding Camus, he had a very sad childhood. The main reason is that his father died during the First World War when he was an infant. And so, death of his father, that was the first blow in his life. And he had great affection towards his mother. His mother was deaf. She was illiterate. But she had taken good care of Camus. And Camus had a great appreciation for his mother, for his deaf, illiterate mother. And he had a modesty which is revealed in his writings. And see, I told you he was born in Algeria. At the age of 25, he came to France. And then his sense of writing as a political act and a journalist he was a journalist for the leftist and the anti-colonial newspapers from 1943 to 47. These are important points which you have to note. Remember, he came to France at the age of 25, and then for him, writing is a political act. And then he was a journalist for leftist and anti-colonial newspapers. And he was the editor of a French resistance paper, Compact, for 3 years. When he was working as an editor, actually he got plenty of time to concentrate on writing. And the best works were written during this period. And then, first of all, an important essay called The Myth of Sisyphus. It is a very important essay, which includes his philosophy of life, which talks about existentialism, which talks about absurdism. These terms are important. I will explain to you what it is. And it is actually the body of the essay. Understood? That is, Camus wrote The Myth of Sisyphus and The Stranger during this period when he was working as an editor. The novel Stranger also contains his existential ideas.